Welcome to World Knowledge Forum and Try Everything 2020. I'm Professor Sang-Kyun Cha, the Dean of Graduate School of Data Science, Seoul National University. Today, I'm very honored to moderate the Fireside Chat with John Hennessy, Mr. Wise Man of Silicon Valley, the former Stanford University president from the year 2000 to 2016, and the chairman of Google Alphabet from 2018. Because of the pandemic, John joins online from California. Hello, John. It's great to see you again, and it's great to host you to Korea.
Good to see you, Professor Cha. I wish I could be there in person.
Yes. In this fireside chat, I look forward to hearing Professor John Hennessy's experience and thought on innovation and education in the face of global challenges. I would like to mention 3 global challenges. The first one is obvious, COVID-19 pandemic. The second one is US-China relation, which is dividing the world again. And third is more serious now to John than us in Korea, the climate change, which may have caused a big wildfire in California. Now, to set the further context, let me provide John's brief bio highlighting his career. I tried to make it short, but please be patient. There's a limit that I can make it short. No one in the world has an admirable career that can match Professor John Hennessy's. He is a great academic and innovator who invented RISC-reduced instruction set computer architecture that revolutionized computing. This week, we heard the news that NVIDIA is buying ARM. How many people know ARM stands for Advanced RISC Architecture? RISC machine, sorry. For this disruptive RISC innovation, John received a 2017 Alan Turing Award, the computer science equivalent of Nobel Prize, with David Patterson from UC Berkeley. John would not be here if he were just a professor writing good papers. In 1984, he co-founded MIPS Computer Systems to change the world with his innovation from Stanford MIPS project. The company went to IPO, was later acquired by Silicon Graphics, another Stanford-born company founded by his former colleague, Jim Clark. After this journey of entrepreneurship, he changed his career by taking key management roles at Stanford, department chair, dean, provost, and finally the president of Stanford in 2000. During his 16-year tenure as a Stanford president, he led extraordinary growth in multidisciplinary research and teaching in the 21st century. He modernized the campus, made Stanford become the center of Silicon Valley. The endowment fund grew more than 4 times, from $6.2 billion to $28 billion last year. After his Stanford presidency, he wrote the book, Leading Matters. Actually, I bought a copy here. So I take this book as a Bible for digital age leadership. In 2017, he initiated Knight Hennessy Scholars Program at Stanford with the innovative ideas of growing a new generation of global leaders. This program selects 100 graduate students each year with a full scholarship from all over the world. Myself being a Stanford alumnus, I'm so proud of what John did. Let me start the first question. Could you explain how you started your MIPS project back in 1981, how this university project turned into a company? Were you confident that this company would succeed?
It's an interesting question. We started with a brainstorming class of graduate students, and the simple question of microprocessors were becoming more and more important in the computing hierarchy, and they were copying mainframes and mini computers. Let's start with a clean sheet of paper and rethink, and that's how we stumbled on the RISC ideas coming from that viewpoint. So after we had done the work, we published the papers, I thought, this is such an obvious great idea that everybody in industry is going to pick it up. And what happened was one after another, the industry projects that were following on the work we had done got canceled. IBM canceled one, Digital Equipment canceled one. And finally, an early computer pioneer, Gordon Bell, came to me and said, you have to start a company because this technology is so disruptive, it obsoletes all the existing products. The only way it'll get out there is if you start a company. I was a happy academic, but he convinced me that if I really believed in the technology, I had to do it.
Oh, yeah. So you finally succeeded, right?
I succeeded. We made a lot of mistakes. I didn't know enough about business and the business side of it then. And we made a lot of mistakes, but we succeeded anyway because the technology was so incredibly good.
Mm-hmm. The industry is undergoing dramatic change now. You know, there's a big M&A even this week. You know, NVIDIA is buying ARM. You know, the NVIDIA's market cap exceeded Intel and even close to Samsung Electronics. And AMD is outperforming Intel in server sectors. And Google has its own AI chips and edge TPUs. And there are numerous AI chip startups such as Samba Nova. Three founders are Stanford professors, Chris Lay and Kunal Olukuton. And where do you see the industry going? What advice would you give to the leaders of Korean semiconductor industry?
Well, Korea's got an incredible semiconductor industry, very strong, and continues to be vibrant. I think what's happened in the industry, if you look at the cycles, the computer industry, if you go back to the 70s and early 80s, it was very vertically oriented. IBM did everything. They did everything, from building semiconductors to building their own hard disks to building the operating system to building the applications. They did everything. And then what happened was we went through this PC period where the industry became horizontally organized. Intel built the chips, Microsoft built the operating system, Oracle and others built the applications, along came the internet and sat on top of that. I think in order to get progress now, we have to reintegrate on this vertical stack. And that's causing a reintegration of the companies and a rethinking, which is why, for example, Google builds a machine learning chip, because they have the knowledge to do it. And of course, you also have players like TSMC playing a key role as a foundry service, which when we started MIPS, there were no foundries. It was one of the difficult things. There was no such thing as a fabless semiconductor company. Now, fabless semiconductor companies like NVIDIA rule the world. So the industry has gone through this tremendous change. But I think it's actually liberated them to get more creativity and bring more innovation into the space.
What do you think would happen to the big companies with the legacy ideas, a thought like Intel? They have to maintain semiconductor lines, while TSMC is providing foundry service.
Well, I think Intel's got some challenges. They've clearly this is the first time in Intel's history they've fallen behind on the basic technology. They always took great pride, good as anybody. When the Japanese semiconductor companies were the best, they were as good as them. When the Korean, they took great pride. And that preserved the company and let it thrive even when they went through ups and downs in their system products and things. Now, all of a sudden, they're not competitive on the basic technology. And that combined with the fact that they've never had a strong software ecosystem inside the company. It's a place where chip designers wear the badges on their shirt of what chips they've worked on. And so I think it's a very challenging time for them. They have to reinvent themselves. But it's possible. Look at Microsoft. Microsoft reinvented itself in the last with their new CEO, and it's been quite dramatic to see the company rebuild on its core expertise and really reemerge as a strong player now.
So yeah, the Microsoft reinvented itself as a cloud, computing company, right? It's but in
go up the enterprise stack.
Right.
Yeah. Move away from the PC. Move away from the PC. Move to the cloud. I think you see companies do that. Net a near-death experience and reinvented itself as a streaming company and has done very well. Adobe reinvented itself. It takes courage, though, to reinvent yourself. It's very hard to do. Sometimes it's easier just to kind of slowly atrophy as a company than it is to kind of make that big jump, because the big jump it's scary. It's hard.
Right. So what you're saying is, at the end, the leadership of the company is the most critical, to the transformation of itself.
Yes.
So, now the cloud computing, big data, AI, and digital transformation has become the foundation of everything. How can these technologies can be used to deal with the COVID-19 and the climate change problems?
So the big advantage of these technologies is their ability to look at extremely complex data and discover relationships. So for example, I think some of the opportunities in the COVID-19 space are probably in things like drug discovery, where we can use machine learning to recognize complex patterns, how proteins fold and structure themselves, to discover, for example, to do a search we have lots of drugs. Some of them might actually be useful against COVID-19. Can we find a structured way to use machine learning to search the existing drugs that have gone through clinical trials? We know they're safe for people. Can we find an intelligent way to search those and find out if any of them might be useful for treating this new virus? Similarly, I think in climate change, we can use the technology both to search for radical breakthroughs in energy technologies that will be more green, more beneficial for the Earth. We can also use it to understand what's happening in the Earth dynamic. Modeling the Earth, it's extremely complex, it's chaotic. Trying to model it with strictly deterministic mathematical models is just too hard a problem because of chaos theory. So can we use AI techniques to determine what the long-term trajectory looks like and predict where we might be in another 10 years?
Well, thank you for sharing your thought on this, the two big problems. Just pick up your remark on the drug discovery. When would this, are we using this at the moment to deal with the COVID-19, or when?
I think we're starting to. Right now, the process of designing a new drug simply takes too long, and too many drugs fail along the way. So even once you've observed the fundamental insight at the lab bench, to get it there, to get it into practice and actually treating patients, there are lots of failures along the way. It fails in phase 1 clinical trial, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial. And the process takes too long, 8 to 10 years typically. So the real question is, could we speed that up and thereby increase the probability that we're getting the drug out, and equally importantly, reduce the cost of the drug development? If we can reduce the risk and the cost, then maybe companies don't need to spend so many billions of dollars to develop a new drug, and therefore it will be cheaper, more available in the developing world. Critical things which I think we can begin to develop technologies to do.
So I understand Google DeepMind is also working on a lot on this topic, and there are pharmaceutical companies trying to adapt to this kind of change, but maybe drawing people, the top talent in AI to the pharmaceutical company would be very difficult. So at the end, who would win, this game? What is your thought? Yeah.
I think right now there is an explosion of interest in AI and in machine learning and deep learning in particular. There's not enough talent out there yet to satisfy all the demand from not only things like drug discovery, but the financial markets, lots of business intelligence markets that are exploding. We've got to build a lot more people in the AI space that understand how to use this technology, and that's why the work you're doing on the new Data Science Institute is particularly important, because there's a dramatic talent shortage. I think some of that talent may end up in the pharmaceutical, some of it may end up in the financial sector, but I think we hope to keep enough core technology there that we can continue the basic technology development, which will be critical. We're not close to done with the basic technology development yet. We're really in the infancy of AI. It took 50 years to get AI born, with the great when the AlphaGo beat the world's Go champion there in South Korea. That was the turning point. That took 50 or 60 years to get to, but we're still just in the beginning phase of seeing this technology mature.
Now, U.S. is the far advanced leader in this AI and the related technologies, and China has been catching up. U.S. fast with its own market scale and its own, unique market control mechanism with one-party system. 15 years ago, Tom Friedman said that the internet makes the world flat. Now we are seeing that the reversal of this trend. Unfortunately, the world is being divided by U.S.-China collision. How do you see this division affect the global business, the global innovation system like Silicon Valley, and the education system?
Well, I think you're right. I think we are coming to a potential divide in the road, which we've already begun to see. Whether or not there is a strategy going forward, it's hard to see right now, because there's a collision of interests both in the commercial sector, which I would say in the commercial sector we're better off just competing against and competing for and trying to bring the best talent to bear. But it overlaps into the national security sector as well, and that creates a whole different overlay over the problem, brings government even more into the picture in terms of saying what can and can't be done. And there are serious national security concerns. I don't think we can brush these aside and say these are not real concerns. It is not hard for somebody to put something into a piece of hardware that becomes a backdoor, a trap door that can leak information, and you and I can never discover it. We'd never find it. We could search and search and search and search, we'd never find it. That creates a real exposure. And I think we're going to have to either decide that we're going to work together and make agreements which prevent that kind of thing from happening, or we're going to fracture the market. Now, the world could have two markets. It could have a market in China, maybe North Korea, a few other places, and it could have a market of the rest of the world, the free world, so to speak. Yeah, we could end up there. It wouldn't be a disaster. Each one of those markets is big enough to support itself. It will slow the pace of technology down a little bit, but it wouldn't be an impossible situation if that's where we end up.
I think this the U.S.-China collision at the moment creates limits the flow of intellectual ideas and also talents. I think that also gives a hard time to China, as I understand. I was involved in evaluating Tsinghua University's program a couple of years ago. With the limit on the inflow of intellectual inflow, China probably suffers in the near term. What do you think about this kind of phenomenon? So would Stanford also work with China closely, or what do you think?
Well, I think we'd work with China with text that the government didn't restrict us somehow, which they're doing, looking increasingly like they may impose restrictions. For example, just recently, restrictions on military, for example. There have been restrictions imposed there. I think both sides will be injured by it. China cut off from various technologies and use of various technologies and various talent. The U.S., I mean, clearly there's a lot of talent in China. A number of those people have made important contributions in the U.S., and we would lose that source of talent, particularly Silicon Valley, which is, Silicon Valley is a magnet for people around the world who want to work on technology, and that has fueled much of the innovation that's gone on in the Valley. So we have to preserve that somehow as we go forward. But it'll be, I think both sides will be injured. It'll probably cause some slowdown in technology. But it'll be something we'll have to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah. So the global big tech companies established the research labs in China in the past. Microsoft had the most successful story with the Microsoft Research Asia in Beijing. Google also planned to set up AI research in Beijing. Now, establishing research labs in China is no longer an option, at least in the short term. So, what would these companies do in Asia? They just don't do anything related with research.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky situation because you look at a market the size of China and not being able to have a footprint in China that also includes some research and development and gets access to some of the talent that exists in China, because China does have a large reservoir of talent. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the rate of progress and things. So how we will navigate that remains to be seen. And obviously in the US, I think everything could be different after the upcoming election. It's just unpredictable right now. Yeah.
So now back to your career. What made you to decide to pursue the administrative roles at Stanford, after your entrepreneurship, journey?
Well, I learned a lot doing a startup. A startup is a time machine. It compresses time in terms of learning. So you learn a lot of things very fast in a startup. And when I came back, initially I didn't take on any administrative roles. I said I want to work on my research for a little while. And then I eventually became chair of the computer science department at Stanford, almost because it was an obligation as somebody who had benefited from the department, be a good citizen, contribute to the department. And then I was asked to be dean of engineering, and I thought about, well, did I like being chair of the department? And I said, yes, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed recruiting new faculty and helping them be successful. So I took the job in engineering, and it turned out it was a wonderful job. My wife still says that was the best job I ever had in the university.
So I think when you became the president of Stanford, what difficulty did you have? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of challenges that you faced that you desired to solve.
Well, the first thing we faced was we were still in the middle of doing a set of innovations for the undergraduate programs to try to make a higher quality experience. Often students would come, and for the first 2 years of their time at Stanford, they'd never be in a class with less than 50 or 60 people. So we decided to try to restructure things to make a lot more small classes, get a lot more interaction, and also to try to build up many more opportunities for undergraduates to be engaged in research, because it is a research university, and that's a unique thing for undergraduates. So we worked on that for a while, and that went well. And then we began to think about where did we want to take the university next, and we concluded that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary work was becoming more and more important, that more of the interesting problems were going to be solved by teams of scholars working together from adjacent fields. So we began to put together a plan to work on that and get ready to build that up. And then the financial crisis hit in 2008, 2009. And we lost about $8 billion in the endowment of the university. So the first thing we had to do was to realign the budget of the university with the reality of what our new income was, and fix that up, and then move forward again. So it took a year or two to get that realigned, but then we managed to move forward and do activities really focused around this interdisciplinary idea.
So I think the Stanford is probably one of the most open-ended university, to my knowledge, with the least barrier among the departments. When no other universities have such open-endedness. So what did you do specifically to promote this the collaboration across the campus?
Well, I think the model starts at the top of the university. At the top, the president and provost and deans are promoting this. Then it's easy for department chairs to get on board and also promote it, as opposed to protect their own silo. But the other thing we did was we did a couple things. We made it very big joint appointments between departments. So, for example, if electrical engineering and computer science, or computer science and biomedical computation, they get together, they could easily construct a joint appointment and make appointment of the individual who would be a bridging individual. And we actually created, as part of the whole campaign that led to this, a set of new fact positions where we would fund half a position. So we'd say, all right, we're going to fund a position on alternative energy. We're going to give you half a faculty position, and any department that wants can go out and take one of their own half positions and find a match for that, and go out and recruit somebody. That created real competition between the departments trying to collaborate and build these bridges. And that made it very easy to kind of get the departments working together. It took time. Some of my colleagues predicted it would be too hard to do. And in fact, I had a colleague at another university who said, well, that was a good idea, too bad it didn't work. He simply wasn't patient enough. Universities take time. They're not the fastest instruments in the world.
Yeah,
but
I think
later on, he said, that was a really good idea. We're going to do that at our place.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I wish I could accept, take it in our university as well. Yeah, I heard that the one professor's salary, half of the salary is at the rate of a certain department A, and another half is follows the rate in another department B. So that actually created an interesting the compensation scheme at Stanford.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during your tenure as Stanford president, the Silicon Valley also grew dramatically. In my psychological sense is a lot more than 10 times, or maybe close to 100 times. This cannot be a coincidence. What did you do to make Stanford and the Silicon Valley grow together?
we've always had a symbiotic relationship dating back to Hewlett and Packard, which is now 75 years ago, the start of sort of the first Stanford spin-out. The university has always seen itself both as a talent magnet, but also it attracted people who were interested in possibly becoming entrepreneurs after they did their research. Because it was a very easy place. It was easy to take a leave of absence, license a technology and go do a startup, and then come back to the university and re-engage. And we've had a lot of faculty that did that. And when they came back to the university, they brought so much experience from starting a company and being in industry. They could give new insights to, and they could coach younger students who might be thinking they'd like to do that as well. So we built up role models. We tried to make it easy. One of the great things about the Valley and Stanford, or Berkeley for that matter, is that industry and university, they respect one another. They do different things, and everybody understands that universities and industry are on different time scales and have different focal lengths. But they respect the work that goes on, and that it makes it possible for them to collaborate and interact in important ways.
So, speaking of the collaboration between Stanford and Silicon Valley, we cannot leave out Google. Google came out of a Stanford digital library project in the 1990s, and it actually went to IPO during your Stanford presidency, and you're also on the Google's board from the early days. Speaking of Google, so we cannot also leave out Professor David Chariton, a serial entrepreneur who gave advice to two young Google founders. I checked this morning with the Forbes, and his fortune is estimated at $7 billion, which is about the same as Vice Chairman J.Y. Lee of Samsung Electronics, Samsung. So, and I should also mention Bill Daly, the Professor Bill Daly, who gave up his Stanford tenure. He's a chief scientist of NVIDIA. So, how can you explain this kind of phenomenon? Many universities in the world try to, copy Stanford, but fail to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a long history, and we have a long history of building up that talent pool, having role models for it, and bringing in the next generation of entrepreneurs. And in our field, you can have a tremendous amount of impact, not just by writing the research papers and doing the research work, but by actually taking that technology out. And one thing I say to people, you look at all the history of Stanford startups, 50 or 60 of them that have been significant. In every single one, people moved, at least for some period of time, from the university to get the company started. You can't start a company with just a set of research papers. You need the minds, the people who really worked on the technology to be part of it.
Now, I want to go back to the education. We talked about, the areas that desperately need, talent, such as AI. And how do you see the education has to change? Most universities, in the world suffer from rigid silo structures and fail to accommodate the fast change of the world.
Getting universities to change requires that you build a long-term plan to get, because they're going to change slowly. We have tenured faculty, there's slow turnover. One of the things we do at Stanford is we hire, the vast majority of the faculty we hire are young faculty, just out of their PhD or a postdoc. We look for people who are in fields that we see as growing in importance to hire. And we often try to put them in a disruptive situation where they'll help bring the department along into the new age. And we really empower those young people because we believe that often the very best idea is going to come from a young 35-year-old faculty member, not necessarily from the great, wise, older faculty member. Sometimes many of the breakthroughs come from those, particularly in the technology and science fields. So we keep trying to innovate in that way and renew ourselves. We like to say, in a university, every day should be a first day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's very impressive, you know. I mean, most of universities in Korea are, publicly funded, and even private ones are, cannot survive without the government subsidies. So that makes it very difficult in Korea. And but on the other hand, I saw that the UC Berkeley, the state university is changing dramatically these days. Do you have some comment on that?
Yeah, all the flagship public universities, Berkeley, UC San Diego, UCLA, Michigan, all are being forced to change as the amount of government state subsidy goes down. So they've had to reinvent themselves and think differently about their sources of income. We have problems in the university systems in the U.S. Probably our biggest challenge is that we have a hard time taming the cost rise of education. And we're going to have to tame it because the major income sources, whether it's tuition from parents or it's money from the state, are growing very slowly. So we're going to have to find a way to deliver education that is of the same quality, but doesn't cost more. And that's a challenge for all of higher education. The good news is the pandemic is forcing us to experiment with various ways of addressing this problem. What can we do online? How do we make it work well? Can we make it more cost effective? And the pandemic is forcing us to do something that universities were very reluctant to face up to. They were kind of conservative. They didn't want to go there. Faculty wanted to continue to teach in the way they've been teaching for many years. But the pandemic is forcing us to reevaluate it.
Yeah, we have to thank the pandemic, in one way. But anyway, so I think
it's the upside.
So now I'm reaching to the final question. Can you please explain the ideas of a Knight Hennessy program? Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, provided, as I understand, $400 million to Stanford for you to start this very innovative program.
Yeah, as I was thinking about stepping down from the Stanford presidency, I started thinking, what do I want to do next? And I've been an educator all my life. Even when I was in a startup company, I was an educator. I was bringing in new young engineers and transmitting insights to them. So I became really dismayed about the quality of leadership around the world. And this was before what's happened in the United States, before what's happened in China, before the challenges, some of the more recent challenges, the pandemic. But already there were real difficulties, right? The Arab Spring had failed. Brexit was already afoot. The immigration crisis was occurring. We could see lots of problems around the world. So I took a look at some of the other leading scholarship programs and said, well, why not build a program that attracts the very best students to do their graduate study and helps them develop their leadership capabilities, their ability to work with others, to work in a diverse environment, to communicate their ideas well. So we attract students from around the world to apply to this program. We get about 6,000 applications for 100 spots. So it's highly competitive, but it's very international. We have, we just got our third class. We now have students from about 35 countries, roughly, around the world, in every discipline. So we have people in business school, law school, medicine, engineering, PhDs, history, all learning together and learning how to develop their leadership skills. And so we hope to do some good in the world by investing in these young people.
I think it builds on top of your 10 virtues of leading matters, and and I think we are close to the end of this session, and there's one person actually from the audience, standing by to ask questions. So, can you take a question?
Hey, Professor. It was an honor to take your lesson. I'm Ho Seok-sa from Kiko, Korea Industrial Complex Industrial Location. I'll ask you questions. First, I would like you to diagnose startup ecosystem in Seoul or South Korea compared with the one in Silicon Valley. Furthermore, I want to listen to your advice on directions, ways, and core elements for making the startup ecosystem in South Korea better. That's all.
Well, I think South Korea has many advantages. Boy, it's got an incredible talent base, and it's got incredible access to technology and existing companies which are really doing cutting-edge work. It's been more dominated by large companies than by entrepreneurial activities, but that's something that could easily change. When I came back from Stanford from my entrepreneurial adventures, I concluded that we should help the students understand how to be entrepreneurs. I went out and started a company. I didn't know about the business side. I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I didn't know what a gross margin was. I didn't know how big sales and marketing should be. And because of that, I made a lot of mistakes. And it worked anyway. That was lucky. But I concluded that we could teach the students the basics of how to build a startup company, how to make a pitch to venture capitalists, how to think about focus, how to think about how much money you needed, and result in higher success rates for our companies. And that is indeed what's happened. So I think there are things like that that can be done to accelerate the entrepreneurial activity that could build on all the great universities and technology you have in South Korea.
Well, thank you very much for your question. Sharing your precious experience and wisdom with the Korean audience. And do you have any final word that that we conclude before we conclude?
When I think about how we change the world, I'm a great believer that the world is going to be changed by the next generation. Those of us that are older created the climate change dilemma. We created an environment in which a pandemic could break out and we couldn't really address it fast enough. We need young people to step up and really try to grapple with these problems and build a better world for themselves and for their children. And that's going to be why. That's why I'm optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic because every time I meet young people that are determined to make a change, I realize the energy and vitality and brilliance that they have. And that's what gives me hope going forward.
Well, thank you. We are very grateful for you being with us today and look forward to having you physically in Korea once the pandemic is over. And let's give a big hand to Professor John Hennessy.
Thank you.